we've had two mayor mazes in this town, one the current mayor and one in the past, who has an interesting backstory. So he's going to be telling that story next week. And then the week following, in March, Bob Pollock from Fort Dalles Museum is going to be doing a program on the Grand Army of the Republic and their role here in the Dalles. So something he's been researching for months now. And he's going to present what his findings are about the cemetery and the work that the GAR did in town. So that should be really interesting. We do have a raffle with a couple of prizes today that we'll draw tickets at the end of the program. And then these tickets and any additional tickets that people purchase and ones from previous programs will be put in a big pool and mixed together, and then we'll draw a couple of grand prize winners at the last program. One of the prizes is millions of dollars in foreign currency, and the other one is a prize basket with local crafts and things worth at least $125. So some good prizes there at the end. So something to look forward to. I guess without further ado, I'll introduce our presenters for today. Dan Boldt, former county surveyor, I believe. Is that your title? And Katie Young, who is a local attorney, is kind of helping him sort through some of the legalities of the complications of land and property history here in Wasco County. So I'll let him follow up.
Great, thank you. And I hope we don't get a bunch of feedback. Kind of move that away. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I am Dan Boldt. I was the county surveyor, elected county surveyor, for quite a number of years. I used to have it in this, but I had to sharpen some this kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed the historical element to being the Wasco County surveyor. Quite often, a private surveyor working somewhere out in the county would come in with just a quagmire of questions about the particular donation land claim he was working on, or even just a deeded farm that had been put together by 14 brothers in 1820. And so I enjoyed the research, and I still enjoy the research. I don't read the legalese as well as maybe I once did. So I suppose that this is false advertising. But we are going to talk about why I think that Dalles found its general shape. But really, I'm talking about land surveying. And yeah, so I think that the natural features around our city is it ringing? Are you able to hear this? I'm hearing my own voice. Shall I turn it?
I think
it is off. So, from my perspective, I think that the city of the Dalles really came because of what was called for years the Dalles of the Columbia. And that's where the Columbia River turned on its side, went through the Narrows, and it is where all river travelers had to get out of their boats and portage around, whether you're going upriver or downriver. And
it's downstairs too.
oh, okay. I'm going to put this farther away from you. Maybe that's a little better. Maybe. Okay. Yeah, the Les Dalles French of the Columbia was upstream here where the river turned into rapids, and it had to be portaged.
I'm getting head shakes down there, Sam, so it's not quite sounding right still. for both Roger and Linda.
I can boom. Will it?
Why don't you switch to a different mic?
Okay. There we go. In front of me. Yeah, so that's why the Native Americans and the settlers, anybody using the river, had to get out of the boat. And then they had to get back into the boat, down below or up above. Either way, you were going to be landing at the Dalles Landing, which is at the mouth of the Mill Creek. And when you get out of your boat, if you had anything to trade, you traded it in what became downtown the Dalles. So that was level land near the river. That's where the landing was. That's where the city of the Dalles, the downtown the Dalles is today. And it was natural because it was easy to get to. In conjunction with the first bluff. Katie lives on the precipice of the first bluff. And she was asking me questions, well, is this part of the first bluff, or is that over there by the Wasco County Hospital? Is that part of the bluff? Because they're really kind of different ridges. And I think just everybody called that general rock formation that forms the horseshoe around downtown. That's all part of the first bluff. Kim's parents were really pleased. John and Donna Lundell were very happy when they built a new house. They moved from this nice house up to the house on the first bluff up behind the plumbing barn. And they were kind of proud of the fact that they had been able to build their home on the first bluff, or precipice of it. The Dalles Landing, that's Mill Creek. Chenoweth Creek, we'll get to it a little bit later, but Justin Chenoweth homesteaded that land that surrounded Chenoweth Creek all the way to the mouth. And the Chenoweth Landing is where a lot of the pioneers built the rafts, and they put in down there. And Justin Chenoweth believed that his landing would develop into a city just the way the Dalles Landing did. But it didn't happen. Turned into a residential landing, I don't know. We've got the creeks. Mill Creek provided clean water, provided power for how many sawmills? A couple of sawmills that I'm aware of, and probably more. And then Mount Hood that gave us the ocean air rising to come past Mount Hood. Rained all over the Columbia River Gorge and around the mountain, but not in the Dalles. And frankly, that's why I'm here. I like the climate. Most of us do. And then it's not a natural feature, but well, I guess it is. All of the trails and then roads that the Native Americans used, and the settlers tended to do that as well. Yeah, Salado Falls, 5 Mile Rapids, talked about Le Grand Dalles. I can't say it. Kim, my wife studied French. She could probably say it properly. And really where I am going to kick in is at the arrival of the homesteaders and the missionaries. And now we're going to call time out. I've given part of this talk a few months ago at the not the Grange Hall, the Mill Creek Hall. If you look at this map, you see like along here a whole bunch of the properties. All of these properties actually were surveyed. Most of them were surveyed. This is somewhere on the eastern seaboard. But the problem is that if you really start looking at them, these common property lines between lots, they didn't have a single basis of bearing. You might build your fence along what you call north, because your compass that has some magnetic deflection that you don't know about. Yours might point over in this direction, and Katie's might point in that direction, and you're supposed to be sharing a common boundary. And so what we see in here is lots of little gaps between properties. Or what's even worse, overlaps between neighbors. And we're kind of funny here in the U.S. We like our boundaries to be certain and not part of our neighbor's land. So there was no clear or consistent standard for how the legal description for a property would be written, nor was there a commonly used basis of bearings or beginning points to these surveys. And what is still the case on the eastern seaboard is just terribly inconsistent ownerships, and people try to clean them up with deeds that come much later. And if Chris Blenars was here from Wasco Title, he would tell you that we've got a bajillion of those inconsistent boundaries here, even with the rectangular system that we have. So the result was gaps and overlaps and a whole bunch of legal messes. And we here in the Dalles, we're not immune to legal messes. So enter Thomas Jefferson. As a young man, he came from a wealthy family, and as all good young men do, they go study in France, as he did. And while he was there, he actually paid attention and learned about the rectangular survey system used throughout Europe, with common basis of bearings, with common methodologies of surveys, with reliance upon a public framework for surveying, not just individual surveyors making it up as they go along. He also learned the value of the metric system. Brought that back to the U.S., but that didn't fly. I wish it had. So he carried his findings to Congress, and he won. I'm going to just read this verbatim. He won the day to dispose of public lands and retire the national debt, which was millions of dollars. He did so with no taxes. And remember, this is following the Civil War, and all those soldiers, many of them didn't get paid, but they were promised land. You go west and you soldiers, you get it for free. The regular homesteaders largely got it for free. That's why they call it the donation land claims. But in reality, they had to pay a nominal fee for the surveying of the lands. Congress created the U.S. Public Land Survey System, and that's the rectangular system that you see here. That's most of all of the United States is developed. A township is 6 miles wide, 6 miles north-south, divided into 36 sections. Each section is 1 square mile or 640 acres. And Congress thought that sounded terribly complicated until Jefferson explained how sensible it really was. For instance, we measured in chains. A chain is 66 feet long. I used one as a freshman at Oregon State. My chain was always in a knot. But if you're measuring, let's say, this mile-long line across the north part of this section, if you go 40 chains, that's half a mile. That's a quarter of a section. And you can actually add 40 chains by 40 chains, and that would be 40 acres. So it was very well thought out. In addition to the Public Land Survey System, they created the Office of the Survey General, actually of the U.S., but at the time this was really discovered, or discussed, Oregon, the settlers were reaching Oregon, and so that they used Oregon as, my perspective, kind of as the guinea pig, as the test state. They created the land claim of 1850, which created the office of Surveyor General of Oregon. John Preston was appointed. He was a well-known surveyor. We even read about him in college. So that was 1850, and in 1860, the United States General Land Office, the GLO, you'll see that all over the place. GLO means General Land Office. Contracted with surveyors from all over the country and sent them to our area. Now, keep in mind that all of those surveyors that came to Oregon came to Oregon via the Dalles. They all came right by here. A few of them stayed. It's important to remember that these surveyors, these contracted surveyors, had been doing townships like this with their whole survey crew. And this was not just when I go surveying. I got me and one other guy. They had a whole crew. They had 5 or 6 at a minimum, and that was in the Great Plains. When they got into the mountains and canyons around here, they literally had teams of people shaving sticks for stakes and digging rocks out of the hillside and hauling them over to where they needed for a survey line. It was a real operation. So that happened in 1860, and that's when the GLO surveyors hit the Dalles area, Wasco County. And man, those guys did good work. I should have brought a field book. Dang, I wish I would have. The main surveyor on the crew, the crew chief, carried a little notebook about the size of, about that size. And he'd have that stuffed in his pocket, and he would be constantly writing notes, or if it was a big crew, he'd have a note taker. And he'd be calling out dimensions, bearings, distances, mountain peaks, fields. Those GLO surveyors really did excellent work, as did their cartographers back in the Dalles for a while, and then it ended up in Oregon City. We'll get there in a minute. But their survey work was precise to the precision level of the day. Remember, they're pulling a chain that's 60 feet long with 0.66 foot long. Each link is that long, and you put 60 of those or however many of those together, you're going to pick up every weed and every twig and every stone along the way. They didn't care. They still pulled them tight. They cleaned them. They just did good work. And their cartographers were just as good. These lines, all the straight lines, I can tell you, that's quarter of a mile within that much precision. They knew that they had a homesteader there. They found his house. They talked to somebody there that told them what his name was. That was George Snipes. We were just talking about it. And that's basically Rowena. He homesteaded a good piece of land. Can you get ready? So let me rephrase, ahead of the 1850 homesteaders that were on their way here, ahead of them were the Methodist Episcopal Indian Mission Plain team. And that was Jason and Daniel Lee, H.K.W. Perkins, and I can never remember what H.K.W. stands for. I have it written somewhere. They founded the mission, and the plaque by my house at Couple Rock says 1838. And they were the first mission group here. 1847, was their mission claim. Well, Katie, you want to jump?
It'll take us into the future a ways, because it wasn't until 1883 that they
Yeah.
talked about this. Do you want me to?
Okay, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
And some of this, we have the surveyors out in the field writing notes, sending them to the Surveyor General's office on a given date. That date shows up on the mapping. And there are lots of dates that are involved with a singular piece of land, and so it's hard to lay this out in chronological order because we're talking about the Catholics here in 1838, and then we're going to talk with them 30 years later, and when they
I can just really talk about the donation land claim and what it could withstand in terms of claims from the military
Okay.
reservation and that.
Yep.
So you want that now?
Sure. And if I get to, we won't repeat it, will we?
What?
Well, if I get to it, if I'm saying the same thing you've already said, I'll shut up. No, go.
You want me to do
I'll stand here and point.
Okay, the reason I'm here is because Dan had a question about a couple of Supreme Court cases. One's an Oregon Supreme Court case and one is a U.S. Supreme Court case that were decided in one was in 1883 and one in 1890. And they had to do with the donation land claims that had been filed in the early 1850s after the 1850 law.
There's the Catholic. We'll come to better maps.
Okay. And the complications were a lot of things had to do with timing, who filed first, who claimed something first. But the missionaries, the Methodist missionaries, the Missionary Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church, which I'm going to call the Methodist Mission, was here actively occupying land in the Dalles area in 1838. And it was there consistently until 1847. Yeah. And at that point, it was, the reason this is relevant is because in 1848, when Oregon was declared a territory by an act of Congress, it claimed, this is the Oregon Territory, reserving to the missionary societies the land they are occupying on the day this act was passed. The act was passed on August 14, 1848. In 1847, while really the only thing happening with white people in the Dalles was the missions, the relationships with the Indian tribes were not going as well, and things were getting rougher. And there may have been other reasons, but the missionaries from the Methodist Mission in the Dalles decided that they wanted to transfer their property to Dr. Marcus Whitman, who also had missions up the river quite a ways. And they wanted to get out, they wanted to go to the valley, or they were ready to leave. So in 1847, in August, they actually transferred it to Dr. Whitman. Long story short, Dr. Whitman took the property, left his nephew here. The Methodist missionaries went down the river, and Dr. Whitman went back to his other missions, and he left his nephew here in the Dalles. And that would have been about in November of 1847. Nobody was here except a 17-year-old nephew of Dr. Whitman at the mission. Then the Whitman massacre occurred, and then we had a few years where infantrymen and government soldiers started coming in to deal with the Indian issue. So actually in 1848, on August 14th, nobody was at the mission, and it was later determined in court cases that the donation land claims that had been filed of that property in 1853 took precedence over the mission claim, and the mission, even though the mission was granted an actual deed or a patent from the U.S. government in 1875, those were later upheld by the courts not to be relevant, or they were void.
Because nobody was there.
Because nobody was there in 1847.
They were down the river.
Everybody, the histories I read, that's what they said when people got tired of the Dalles, they went down the river. So, or except for Dr. Whitman, who went up the river. But that's the river was obviously the transportation. Bigelow claim and the city claim more than.
We'll come to us soon enough. Let me
Okay.
jump back. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
We'll get you right back here. Yeah, so some of these maps are really brilliant. They're done so well, but they're done on a scale like this that doesn't translate well to my computer program. But these are, I like this because this shows most all of the claims around the Dalles. Bigelow's not up there, is it? This is Sims. Bigelow is right in here. Why doesn't they hadn't surveyed?
Maybe because it was in litigation for all
Maybe.
those years.
Yeah.
Or conflict.
I don't know. They just jumped too. And this is the Methodist, what the Methodist mission came to be. What date is this? What do you think, Katie?
Well, they got their patent in 1875. So
That-
they came back after they had left. They came back and applied under that territorial law to establish their mission.
And so the military had claimed this land that was apparently unused or little used and took it over. I don't know how better to describe it.
Well, it was kind of, the Methodists left, but then in 1850, when things had settled down, they came back and they filed a claim that had an actual survey done in 1852 to establish their 640 acres that 1848 Act of Congress said was reserved to the missionaries
Right.
who were occupying land in 1848, which they weren't.
Which did not apply to the military reservation land. That seems logical, it seems illogical that the military hooks around the Methodist claim. But that was how the court viewed the development. I don't know.
Well, I think the military, in the research from these cases, it says the military reservation actual boundaries weren't established until 1859.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the one. Is that
And-
the 1 mile square one?
I think that is. So let's just keep going. This tort case that we're talking about is actually Kelly versus Dalles City, which is hard for me to understand because we're not talking about land owned by Kelly, well it was, but the claim that we were reading about all the time was Bigelow and the military reserve. So we'll just keep. Too far. So Winston Bigelow, I don't know whether he had an E in there or not. I've seen it both ways many times, but he was the original claimant for that piece of land that I've highlighted. His was DLC 40. He was among the very first people that made claims here. He patented the land. Okay, we all need to understand that when you got land, and it's still true, I'm not sure. You get land from the United States government, you do not receive a deed, you receive a patent, which is as good as a deed. It can almost be used synonymously. And there are a lot of farms right around here even that are, their document of ownership is not a deed, it's a patent. Bigelow patented in 1881, except that there were some court rulings that we're talking about. I don't know if you want to come back up here?
I can do this. So this Bigelow property
It's kind of a vaudeville.
about Kelly, if I talk about Kelly, so, no, I don't have to listen, but thank you. Okay. Well, when I put this on here, I could not,
That's okay.
that's okay. So, Bigelow in 1853, single man, he could apply for a donation land claim act, donation land claim of 320 acres, half, because he wasn't married. So he applied for 320 acres. He applied on November 1 of 1853. On the 22nd of November, he recorded at the land office in the Dalles his drawing with marks and measurements of where he thought his land claim was. He followed it up in 1856 actually with an actual survey, because at that point there were surveyors in the area that helped him with that. And he lived on that property from November 1 of 1853 to 1861. And that was enough, and he cultivated, lived there, enough to under the donation land law, that should be his property. And he, in 1861, started selling off parcels. And he sold off parcels to 3 different people, Kelly, Waite, and Humison. Kelly ended up buying out the other 2, so eventually Kelly he thought he owned everything that Bigelow had a claim for. Bigelow had not gotten his patent from the U.S. yet, and I don't quite know why, but he didn't get it until 1881. And I think when the missionaries got their patent in 1875, they kind of everybody started realizing that there were overlaps. And there was also an overlap into the military reservation. So the issue of this later case, the city actually, so the military reservation was there from 1852, but not really ever formally designated by a survey until 1859, when it was chopped down to 1 acre, 1 square mile.
When the reserve was.
Yeah.
Military reserve.
Yeah. So and then in 1871, by an act of Congress, Congress said you can get rid of unnecessary lands. I'm getting out of order here, because to get that drawing for the military reservation at 1 square mile, which was done in 1859, the surveyor, Mr. Dixon, encroached into the Bigelow land claim by some amount of property. So there were encroachments from the Methodists and encroachments from the military reservation that affected those property owners who had bought from Bigelow. So all of the court cases were meant to resolve those underlying claims. The reason the Dalles City got involved is because after Fort Dalles ceased operating as a fort, they offered up to people who wanted to buy excess land or unnecessary land up for sale, and the Dalles bought some. And the Dalles bought the part that encroached into the Bigelow land claim.
There was a grant to Dalles City of this. It's this wedge here, shaky, but that piece of land came without litigation.
That was earlier, I think, when somebody at the military decided to give down to the first bluff or something, and give up everything to the first bluff. And that was mentioned in one of the cases, but it wasn't part of the encroachment into that Bigelow thing. They got that the other way, and they got that by buying it for $5 an acre from the military reservation. So the end of the story is that basically Bigelow was able to, in a number of cases that all went to their jurisdiction Supreme Court, prove that his claim was the oldest one, and that he got to all the places first, he finished first, and everybody else who tried to come onto his property didn't have the authority to do it.
Yeah.
So they would have had to pay him. They said that when the military, in the case on the military part that the Dalles bought, the Dalles said that should be ours, and they said, no, you could only have gotten something from the military if the military had a right to it, and the military didn't have a right to it because Mr. Bigelow's claim was done and proved before 1859, when President of the United States to authorize and authoritatively state that was those were the boundaries. So this is the mess that happens.
And went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court.
And the lines and the surveys are the things that save you, the distances and the times that pass, you know, in the 1850s, in terms of getting the information, getting your claim filed in Oregon City, getting your claim, you know, surveyed. Yes, Jim?
So was the ruling based on the filing date then, which preceded, because the patent, the actual deed,
Was
was not
1881.
issued until 20 years later?
They said that if he was entitled to what he filed for before then, that held precedence over the later attempt to take part. The missionary one would have been earlier if they'd been able to prove that they were here in 1848, but they couldn't prove that.
And Bigelow's claim was supported by those earlier drawings of Bigelow's house and his field. That was evidence of his occupation.
Well, he certainly thought he finished it, I think, by 1861 when he started transferring parcels to other people. They didn't know what they were getting into, but that's what happens sometimes. Okay.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I couldn't have presented that in a million years. So, of course, now we're bouncing back to the other Indian mission claim, the St. Peter's Catholic claim, which had its own quirks. All but a corner of it, two corners of it, was kept by the Catholics. But they were in and out too, Katie, right?
But maybe they were here on August 14th.
I think they were here at the right time.
They were the ones that told the fellow at that Perrin Whitman, who was at the Methodist mission, that his uncle had been murdered and that
They-
the Catholics.
They did. I just finished a monster of a book, it's like 650 pages, about Eliza Spalding. This is fiction based on truth. She was the first white girl to come across the Oregon Trail. Her family, the Spaldings, traveled with the Whitmans, and they ran parallel missions, one in Walla Walla and the other out of La Grande. She wrote, or the book written about her, she's quoted as explaining just how vicious the verbal war between the Catholics and the Methodists was. And that wasn't just in Eastern Oregon, that took place here. So when I see Father Rousseau and Perkins, I've trained myself to believe that they were kind of at odds, and they weren't on the same team, and they weren't pulling in the same direction. So this is another GLO survey and field notes on that claim. Father Rousseau founded it at a full 640 acres, which was surveyed in 1881 by one of my favorite GLO surveyors, Daniel Murphy. He surveyed it to be 628.6 acres. And from this point forward, I'm going to start including the subdivisions that were later made in each of these claims, or most of the claims. And the Catholic claim, we all know where it is. That's the Catholic Church and St. Mary's Academy and the Fleck properties. Yeah, we're close. Fruitland Park addition, which is a massive subdivision. I don't know if anybody lives in Fruitland Park. Well, I know a lot of people do. And I'll tell you that the surveying community calls it Fruitless Park because there are so many errors. And Walter Ober, the surveyor that laid it out, didn't know how to calculate a curve. So you can tell he just laid a coffee can or something and traced an arc, and that was curvature of this, any particular piece of land that was being bought and sold as a city lot. So Fruitland Park was massive. It was from Chenoweth Road, or West 10th Street, we know it today, all the way up to the top of must be the second bluff, where Cherry Heights comes around on the top land. In Hermit's Way, there are several homes there that are on the bluff. Those homes are a part of Fruitless Park. Continuing this first wave of private donation land claims, I'm going to kind of go through the list. Justin Chenoweth, we already talked about. He came west in a military party of 1849. He claimed all of the land around Chenoweth Creek from the mouth of the Columbia all the way up, and including Foley Lakes. He bordered Crate. Crate was north of him, and John Irvine was south. We're going to get to Irvine here in just a minute. Next, and these are in order of the claims made in the Dalles land office. So Justin Chenoweth was the first, actually. Crates was second at DLC 38. He was a Hudson's Bay guy. He came to the Dalles to take up his claim in 1851. He was, well, know where Crate's Point is. That's the dude. That's Edward Crate. He thought he had claimed up to the mouth of Chenoweth Creek, but he was wrong. Justin Chenoweth got there first, and so Crate, they were friends. It was not a big deal, but he didn't get some of the land that he thought he had claimed. Then we come to John Irvine. Much of what we know as Chenoweth today was claimed by John Irvine. Watonka High School, the elementary school. Chenoweth Home Tracts is a huge subdivision. I have no idea how many lots are in it. That was all his land. Nice, level, tillable land. Then we come to Dr. Shogg. He was a physician, and he was involved with the hospital out there in Chenoweth. And I don't know where this hospital was. Something tells me that it may have had something to do with the poor farm there by what I know is Columbia Basin Nursing Home. That area might have been where the hospital was. I don't really know. Shogg was, though, it was his land that Snipes Acres was developed upon because he later sold to George Snipes. Josiah Marsh, DLC 42, was along the Columbia, north of Crates, and south of George Snipes in Rowena. And Marsh, it's noted somewhere, he came by ox team in 1854. And now we'll move into these. This is downtown the Dalles stuff here. I guess Thompson DLC is outside of town, but I view Thompson Addition as residential of Dalles land. Captain Robert R. Thompson got here to the Dalles in 1845. He got here too early. He arrived 5 years before the donation land claim law goes into effect. And so he hung around, but there was nobody else here. There was no one to trade with, no one to buy supplies from. He gave up and moved on to the Willamette Valley, but he had checked out the Dalles, and he knew where he wanted to have his subdivision, or his donation land claim. And so he, being a smart man, he figured out that he'd return to the Dalles in 1850 to homestead, which he did. And later the story goes, he partnered up with Humison, and the two of them built a massive riverboat at Duford, and they moved it to the mouth of the Deschutes on the Upper Columbia overland from Duford. No, they didn't float down 15 miles. This is a riverboat. But those guys did it. They moved it to the mouth of the Deschutes and operated it for years. Thompson had his land here patented, and he was clearly the owner, and he began subdividing. I don't know, have the year of it. Somewhere around here I have the plat of Thompson Addition, which is kind of neat. So he moved to Portland, then later to San Francisco. He died a multi-millionaire, that's from McNeil, and the land later became Thompson Addition. Being a multi-millionaire in 1860 was something. You know, $1 million doesn't buy what it used to do. Then we come to one of the real movers and shakers in this couple in the Dalles. William and Mary Laughlin. I don't know why. How do they read it here? They were on, or they claimed DLC 38, which was right downtown the Dalles. They arrived in 1850, just poorer than poor, according to their daughter's writings. Mary Laughlin sewed shirts out of not burlap, but canvas bags for the military, and they paid her. They had stock that was emaciated. It didn't have any meat on the bones, but they had skin. So she began manufacturing gloves for the military, and that was their income during that first winter here. Now we read elsewhere that William was a carpenter, and he was building cabins or something.
Hired by the fort to build
by the fort,
barracks.
and he was making pretty good money, like $10 a day or something, which was something. Mary wrote also about the Major Tucker marking out the 10-mile square military reservation boundaries. So they were the first, and this is the first military reservation survey, if that's what you want to call it. They were authorized to take or to claim 10 mile by 10 mile square, which kind of cracks me up because I did algebra, and I know that 10 miles times 10 miles is 100 square miles, which is a lot of land. But so far as I know, the only survey ever done of the 10-mile square reservation was by Major Tucker, who went to a witness tree at 12th and Mount Hood Street. So even that early, we had dirt streets that were named just the way they are now. I take this to be 12th Street over on Mount Hood. It's got to be Mount Hood Street. It was right at Mount Hood. And Tucker's crew measured, this is brilliant, they went 5 miles east, they went 5 miles west from this witness tree at this intersection, 5 miles north, 5 miles south, drove a stake in the ground and called that their 10 square mile reserve. And that became a problem later, really.
It did, but that's where the U.S. Supreme Court said that they didn't establish it because it wasn't authorized by the president.
Yeah.
It wasn't properly, they didn't go through all the right steps, that it was aspirational to have these 10 square mile forts, but that it was just go out and get that, but until they had finished all of the paperwork and followed the process, it wasn't a military reservation.
And it made no sense either here because 10 miles north, you're in the river, and east, I mean.
Yeah.
So the Laughlins occupied probably the best donation claim ever done in the Dalles. They were right downtown. The east of the Dalles downtown was Laughlin's land. They claimed a half-mile wide, half-mile north and south, and 2 miles long, leaving, their northwest corner, I have found, it is about 12 feet east of the Gitchell building, the brick building on the other side of the railroad tracks. That's where Laughlin's claim started, and they took a half-mile swath pretty much on an angle east, and that was their claim. Remarkable. The house was at First and Laughlin Street, and their claim later became at least 2 subdivisions. I'd have to study it, but offhand I know that Laughlin Addition was theirs, and so was Bluff Addition. Then we come to John Sims, DLC 39. I think these guys must have been in line at the land office. You know, they're neighbors on the ground, and their DLC numbers are consecutive. Sims bordered Laughlin and Bigelow. We've talked about Bigelow already. And the Thompson DLC, which we talked about. In 1953, he opened a store with Orlando Hunnison at First and Union at the Landing. And so, since that's where all the boats came in and went out, that was a good place to have your store. It did well. He grew, his holdings grew and prospered. And John Sims was the first Wasco County Sheriff. Moving to Charles Denton, who's, I think I have the next frame I can show you where Denton claimed. He was just outside city limits on Dry Hollow. I would say that just about where Dry Hollow and 3 Mile Split is where his DLC was. Just beyond the Dalles city limits on Mill Creek, excuse me. I think that's wrong. No, that's right. Never mind. He established the first nursery in Wasco County, and the oak tree, which was the treaty oak tree, was on his property, where the Treaty of 1855 was signed by the tribes. And I don't know how many tribes it was, I think 2. Does anybody here know? But anyway, that's where it happened. And I don't know why I have this note written here, but on September 1853, the name of the city, because they named it Wascopam, and that was the historic name that the tribes used for this place. And it remained so for, 8 years or 7 years, till March of 1860. And then I've included this one little note here about Captain Gates, Colonel Gates. He was an attorney, he came in 1854. We don't know why, but he did not file a claim, yet he was very involved with what he's called the father of Dalles City. He surveyed the site for the Dalles City downtown, and Gates Addition, which is where Kim and I live, we're in Gates Addition. It was named in his honor. He was credited with being the father of Dalles City.
Did that include his house, which is on there right below the old St. Paul's?
I think.
And the hotel, 101 East 3rd, the building we have is supposed to have been, that was the Gates Block Hotel.
Yeah, that was his. I have a map in my folder here because since I live there, I have my lot red. And we can tell from that.
I just wondered if he got one down to the river. If he went up the hill next to some of the others.
Yeah, I don't think he got to the river.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't know. I don't know is the right answer.
Okay.
Now we'll move. Oh, I think I've got a blow up of this. Maybe not. Well, we can use this. Downtown the Dalles, here's Laughlin's field, and the Laughlin house was here. The Laughlin claim started at the Gitchell building, which is probably about there, came a half mile, and then 2 miles out to somewhere in this vicinity. So this was the general location of the Laughlin claim. And Sims' donation claim is here. Thompson hadn't claimed yet, so the Thompson land is off here. And I think I have a blow-up of this map that we can look at later. But what I've got highlighted here is alluding back to what Katie's been talking about. This was the remapped, we haven't hit that yet, the remapped Dalles claim. They were ordered to reduce their 10 square miles down to 1 square mile, or 640 acres. And we've got a couple slides of that yet to come. And this circle is just denoting that Bigelow is somewhere in that general location. Oh, this. Who's seen this map? It circulates pretty regularly. When I look at that, my brain just like blows up. There's so many lines and so many different competing claims that's in there. But in reality, this diagram, which was drawn in 1861, and then this copy was made in 1894 by Ed Sharp, who was a county surveyor long before me. And this is Sharp's work. I'm doing a highlight on my screen here. Yeah. This looks really complicated until you blow it way up, and I don't think I'm going to do it here, and use these little colored boxes here, which identifies, which says this box or land is connected here, and that's connected there. It's a fantastic drawing that doesn't show up very well on the screen. Laughlin and Lord is one of the subdivisions that came to be, that was carved out of the Laughlin claim. Elizabeth Laughlin married Lord. I don't know what his name is. Somebody here? Wentworth Lord. And this was their subdivision that was next to Laughlin's addition and Bluff addition. And this is the map that delineates the 640-acre version of the reservation that was designed to solve all the problems, to get rid of this massive 100-mile dedication to the military. So this is roughly 640 acres, or 1 square mile. And I've got a copy of this that hangs on our wall at home. It's over here on the wall if you want to get close to it later to kind of look at it.
The Rain Survey and the Dixon were competing and different by a little bit.
By a little bit.
In the Bigelow property.
On the Bigelow property, which is right in here.
I think this would have been okay and not gone into the Bigelow property, but the Dixon one, which was held to be the authentic, the real one, did.
Okay. I like this now because this line, the east line of the military reserve, began at the east face of the rock outcropping at the mouth of Mill Creek, which does me no good these days because the river level is higher. I don't know, it might be blowing up, who knows? But we know generally where it was. And it moves south right through what's called Sugarloaf Rock here, which I know about. My dad was the pastor at Calvary Baptist Church when we came here. And I used to play on the top of this rock that was next to the parking lot in the back of the church, north of the church parking lot. And my dad caught me up there one time, and I was in trouble because you could hop from the rock over to the roof of the house. And Jill DeRoe's not here, but they own that house. Anyway, it's pretty neat that this line starts at a known location, even though we can't exactly find it today, through a real known location. This note here and the description down below describes a cross carved in the top of Sugarloaf Rock. And then it extends to a point which is on the hill above the Readiness Center here at the Dalles. I have no idea how many hours tromping around in the oak trees with grass and oak leaves up above my knees, knowing that there's a monument there. There was a monument set by this survey, and then that was replaced with a concrete monument that says DLC and then a number, which means Dalles city limits. And those Dalles city limits monuments, I found 3 or 4 of them in different places around the city limits, which I could have shown you on that dark blue map. But I know that thing exists up there. There's been nothing in there to destroy a big chunk of concrete. And I've been up there some days with a piece of rebar, and I just start poking the ground in a pattern. And one of these days I'm going to bang into that piece of concrete. Just know it. I've got a couple other guys that walk up there too, and they're walking along with it. Sorry. And don't ask me why, but the Methodist mission boundary shows up on this map, but the Catholic claimed it's not. Tell me why. And we're going to see here in a row several little maps, and I'm not going to dwell on them other than in 1868, they were still trying to logic through who owned what in this court case. And the General Land Office drew this and some other drawings to help the court.
Was the Catholic mission so defined and so used that nobody questioned it? Because it seems like it always shows up in that court.
I agree. And maybe nobody was out there.
Well, there's supposed to have been, like the white church next to where St. Peter is the third church. So there's that big rock next to Columbia Basin that says 300 feet south of this is where the original grounds were, which basically is the kind of like the Blakely Way area, and the Catholic cemetery sort of hooks onto that. It appears to. I don't know, but legally.
I can't give you an answer why it's not shown here. It may be as simple as that they were really concentrating in this area and maybe that was important. Who knows? And there's some other maps that do show it. The stuff was done in 1868.
Okay, but really early, well, I don't know the date though, when they even moved the white church downtown. Built the white church downtown, right where St. Peter's is now. Yeah. Which was close to that period, because in there, the organ, that's the wooden organ in the church is supposed to have been used in that church, and it has a date. I think, it surprised me at how early it was. Because then the St. Mary's was built across, the first St. Mary's was in the 1860s. And of course the big church wasn't built until 98, or 97 or 98, 1898. But all that territory there, and St. Mary's was built there in was it 68? The brick St. Mary's?
I think so.
Was really early. And that was downtown.
I'm just going to venture to guess that it wasn't in a controversy and they didn't need to map it. And don't quote me because I could be totally wrong. I don't know. This is that wedge that we were talking about a little while ago. That's the Fort Dalles is over here, and this was the piece of land that was granted to Dalles City and called the extension of Liberty Street, even though actually the street that it surrounded was Washington. This is land confirmed to the Methodist claim, which is, the Methodist claim here is it's yellow, kind of like the donut in the military is the donut hole. Then in 1875, which is quite a bit later, and I thought this was probably the real deal, except Katie's got me the other ones now. Another map of the same, of the same property, only done a couple of years later. This is the first plat of the Dalles. It cracks me up that the cartographer did what's an absolute no-no these days. He drew this thing so that north is on the bottom of the page at an angle, which for me makes it almost impossible to read. I have to print it and then turn it over. But what I like is the fact that we were known then as the Dalles OGN. And this is a copy of the original that's parked in the Wasco County Courthouse, and this is actually the surveyor's copy, and that's my handwriting as to what it is, because it doesn't have much labeling.
So is the courthouse on the map? Is this courthouse on the map?
No, this is
This is
too old.
1859.
Oh, this one? I don't know. We can look it up later. Laughlin's edition. And I'll just say, parenthetically, what's written here is written by Brad Cross, the current Wasco County surveyor. There are a lot of deed problems in what used to be Laughlin's edition. The Dalles City street grid is generally east, west, north, and south. But the Laughlin claim went off at quite an angle to the northeast. And the title to what's now the Wasco County, it's not the courthouse, it's the administrative center, or is that what we call it, downtown, the old Payless?
Old Bill Payless.
There was a corner of the building there that was not patented, because it lies outside the lot that it purports to be on. And it's not alone. There are several of them up here. And maybe I don't want to say it out loud because it might freak people out, but I think adverse possession works in people's favor here. But that's how things went in 1862. And I'm going to wrap it up by a plug.
Oh, yeah.
If you were at the Mill Creek Hall, I covered this just a little bit. One of the heroes of the surveying community was John Preston. He came here in 1850. He was the Oregon Surveyor General, and his prime duty for when he arrived was to establish what's known today as the Willamette, what is it? The Willamette Meridian, and the baseline that comes east and west. And so he was to look for a place on the ground where one could physically stand or stand behind a survey instrument and see as far as you can north, missing the bend in the river and missing Vancouver Lake. You look south as far as you can down the Willamette Valley. You look west, and he found a notch in the Cascade Mountains, or Coast Range, where he could see the farthest, and he found a place where he could run a baseline east and miss the swing of the river. And that baseline goes right through Wasco County. I can take you to several monuments that are right on this baseline. That's generally the 5-mile area. I just find that very fascinating. The Willamette Meridian forms a big X or a cross. North-south is the meridian line. East-west is the baseline, which comes by us and goes all the way to the Oregon coast and all the way to Idaho. And I should be able to tell you, I think it goes through Idaho. Don't quote me on that.
Is baseline road in River County?
Yeah.
Upper Valley?
Baseline Road. There's Baseline Road in Walla Walla, same thing. The baseline was continuous.
That's flat school on the baseline.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty neat. So he set a stone at that point so he could see in all four directions to establish prime meridians. So the Willamette Meridian is the prime, goes a long ways up into Washington, a long ways to the California border, east-west, goes clear to Portland, clear to the ocean. And every piece of land refers to the township 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, north or south, and range 1, 2, 3, 4. We happen to be in about range 12 here in the Dalles going east, and then there's ranges going west to the ocean. And I just think it's fascinating that this place is now a state park. It's up off of Skyline Road, West Hills of Portland. Go on Skyline Road till you see the sign. You won't be able to see the stone. The stone is buried about 6 feet down, and there's a big iron monument above that, and then this brass plate here. It's got a little stupid circle on there, but that is the position. All our properties, if you live in rural Oregon or Washington, your property is described based on that stone in that location.
Wow.
The Willamette Meridian, we don't need to reread this. Yeah, so how did the Dalles find its shape? Obviously the mountain and the river and the creeks. The Native Americans gathered here for generations because of the Dalles of the Columbia, the rapids. They forced human beings to get out of their boats, whether they're going up the river or down the river, and most of those boats ended up one way or the other at the Dalles landing. And at the landing is where you're probably going to find other humans, although when Thompson went there weren't any humans yet. But the Indians congregated there, the early settlers congregated there, hopefully to buy and sell and trade goods. People stuck around. Our little city by the big river next to the big mountain survived. Our little town grew. They passed, Colonel Gates and his brethren passed local laws to keep people safe. The climate was pretty good. Our little town survived.
Being the significance to the yellow circle in the eastern quarter of the map.
Yes. So, Willamette Meridian was the last meridian in the United States. Eastern seaboard, all of this land was sold by meets and bounds and subject to all the problems that we've talked about. The very first prime meridian was, what was it, the Seven Ranges, I think they called it, right there, which is north of the Ohio River, I believe, something like that. So that's where the first meridian was, and this is a lousy copy, but there were 9 meridians, including the Willamette Meridian, which is us right here. And that's the same flag that we was talking about. Questions? Yes?
Just 2 minor questions. Somewhere at the beginning, I just read a couple of words saying that Oregon is a race state.
Oregon is a race state to this day.
What is that?
Back in the 1850s, that was a big deal. We were very fortunate to have the General Land Office right here in the Dalles. So when, let's say, Laughlin was ready to stake the claim onto his land, he had to cultivate it for, I think it was 5 years, I should know that, and had to have built a home, a dwelling on that land, And if he had done so and survived on that land for 5 years, he would go to the land office with his evidence and his money to pay for the survey and stake his claim. And they call it a race stake because whoever claimed a piece of land first could claim it. If you were the second guy in line, you couldn't claim what the first guy in line just did claim. So
Okay,
it's a
so
race
it's like,
stake.
so it's like a race and not racial. It's
Oh,
like a race.
no, it's
What?
like,
Sorry,
it's
you
like
know.
run to the
Yeah,
land
yeah.
office.
Okay. So the second, thank you. And then the second question is, you had made a reference, I think, that, the first hospital was in the Dalles was over by where Columbia Basin is.
I don't know that.
Or farm. or
I know
something?
that Dr. Shaw practiced medicine in a place which was associated with a hospital. And I'm left scratching my head because in the Catholic claim, I don't know of any other old hospital. Does anybody here?
I don't believe it's where Columbia Basin was. That used to be the old rodeo and fairgrounds.
Yeah, right.
And I've never seen mention that there was a hospital in that site.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Nor have I seen any evidence of another place that had even a medical office.
What about the old original pork farm? It was up on Chinook
Yeah,
Road.
it could be. We thought about that
And they
too.
added to it, they just kept
The
adding
Par
to it.
Farm was that whole
That was where
part of that
Columbia Basin
land,
is.
where the county road shop is on 10th Street.
No, that's this side of the
Yeah.
road shop.
Yeah.
And that was a poor farm?
Just where Columbia Basin is
Yes.
now, and they just added on to the north.
Yep, that's true.
I know they did that, because I hold the same for one of the hallways that's in there.
Yeah, you can tell. Look at the two buildings; they're different age. Yeah, the county Poor Farm was social care for people who had less. It was a thing. People would grow their own vegetables.
Well, I just read about a farm up the river in the Klickitat County's historical stuff. It was a pretty good description, but every county had a poor farm. That was what they called it, because the county was responsible for people who became indigent and just didn't have anything. They had to take care of it.
Yeah.
Right. We have a different system now. But where McMinimans is in Troutdale,
That's right.
that was the Multnomah County Poor Farm.
Right.
And where the building, well, it was, I guess, my dad always referred to it as a poor farm, is where the building that has been removed, but where Columbia Basin was behind it. When we lived here in 1948, we lived right up the street in Blakely Way. And, that was a great big 3-story cement building that had big slides on each end of it as a fire escape.
I've seen photos of that building.
Yeah, well, that was the poor farm. I mean, that's what was, I think, left of the poor farm. By then, it was more like we consider a nursing home for the people who, kind of like Columbia Basin is now, except it was much.
When the county road department was located out on 10th Street there, we call it the barn. That was the building that's farthest to the east on that property behind the fence. And in the barn, yeah.
The county road equipment.
Well, but prior to that, in that what we call the barn, there are concrete troughs.
That's for the horses.
Yeah.
I've been in that building.
Oh yeah, I've been in that. That's where we stored our survey gear in that. We hated the troughs because we always trip on them. Yeah, and I was always told that was a nursery as well for plant starts.
Well, yeah, they probably raised up there.
Every shop building, they had a cord that was a piece of culvert pipe, basically. And it was about this big around, and there was sports tools all the way around it. And it was track is right in the middle.
Well, that's all really interesting.
That's all I've got, man. I'm ready for that.
Thank you.
So what happens now? We go home?
You had mentioned you wanted a
Oh, I'm gonna
nap.
get a cookie.
Oh, cookie, and then a
And we
nap.
run the raffle.
Anybody who wants their ticket to win is in this jar.
Did we get sponsors downstairs?
Oh, I saw that. Great part. I'd love to hear it.
As the presenter, you get to draw the winning raffle ticket.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the second one.
Okay.
First one is Randy Stewart. Okay, this is the second one.
Randy Stewart.
There you go, Randy. Well, this one doesn't have a name.
Bob Ross, picking up county history.
Like we can read a number.
Excellent. Yeah.
So the last three digits on the number, do people have their card, their other, is 093.
What number was that?
093?
All right.
Do I just pull it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.